What's up, Leica fans? Welcome to another episode of Leica Tech Talk, our ongoing YouTube live series where we get to dive deep into the technical aspects of Leica cameras and lenses and all the joy and fun that they bring to us and our photography. I'm Antonio, your host, and also I want to welcome you to our brand new Tech Talk space. This is our new location where we'll be bringing you these programs from. So say hi in the chat. I see you guys down there. Sound off on where you're tuning in from, and be sure to ask lots of questions. We'll do our best to answer as many as we can live on today's program. But I am only one half of this program, so I must introduce my co-host, co-conspirer, and good friend and colleague, John Kreidler, our pro imaging specialist, who is still coming to us remotely. John, I hope that we'll be able to both be here sometime in the not too distant future. But for now, welcome remotely to episode 2, John.
Hi, Antonio. It's great to spend some time with you here today as we dive deep into classic lenses as they work with the most modern and ultimate M cameras, the M10R and the M10 Monochrome. We'll be looking at today, as you know, the 28 Sumeron, one of your favorites, as well as the 90mm Thambar. And I understand, Antonio, that recently you were in the Wayback Machine, headed back to 1966 to listen to the debut of the Beatles' Revolver album. And while you were there in 1966, you picked up a lens. What lens was that?
Yes. Well, if for anyone paying attention to today's news, we have a new lens, but it's a new old lens that we've reissued. So that would be this beautiful baby here, the new old original Noctilux 50mm f1.2. So this here is the original Noctilux, now reissued, now once again a part of the product portfolio. Let's get a tight shot on that right there. It's quite a beauty. It's an accurate recreation of the original, and not only for the the image rendering and the build. It's a beauty of a lens. So quite a legacy that we have here brought back into our portfolio. And yeah, John, I think the topic of classic lenses is something that a lot of people have maybe asked us about, especially in recent times, where you mentioned the maximum M cameras. We've released just in the past year alone the M10 Monochrome and M10R, which we went to a higher resolution, right, 40 megapixels. And people have been asking us since day one, wouldn't you say that, are the old lenses okay? What's the next step?
Right. So spoiler alert, they work just fine, and they resolve beautifully, and they still maintain their unique rendering signatures. And I would say to some extent, it's a little more amplified. So, I think we ought to start digging in, and we'll briefly go over kind of some of the features of the M10R and the M10 Monochrome. And Antonio, why don't you just briefly go over kind of the features of the M10R and what you love about it?
Yeah, so let me say, with the M10R, the 40 megapixel color sensor, to me, what's so special about it is, in the end, the color quality. You have all that added resolution, all that added dynamic range, all the fine detail that you see, but the color coming out of this camera has given me wow moment after wow moment, especially when I put vintage lenses on here. And that's kind of been the main motivation of us even doing this episode, to talk classic lenses, is partly motivated by this camera alone. It's the biggest generational leap we've seen in resolution, from 24 to the standard M10s to now 40. But the color here is a big part of the story. And with the vintage glass, quite special. Now, of course, its companion is the M10 Monochrome, which actually came out just before, early in 2020. And yeah, John, what can you tell us a little bit about the M10 Monochrome and its capabilities?
Well, again, it's a 40 megapixel sensor, and to me, why I like to shoot the monochrome is it helps me become a better photographer. A lot of times constantly shooting color, whether it's an SL2, S3, or M10R, you grow accustomed, right, to looking for
Hmm.
color, and color becomes a story. Color is the driver. But for me, using the monochrome, it kind of takes me back to start to look more at light and shadow, more of the graphic elements of photography. And I feel it makes me a better photographer. So I'm looking to tell those stories really in a different way. And I would argue a more pure way.
Hmm.
So let's talk a little bit about the sensor in both of these cameras.
Yeah, so ultimately, I look at it as just pick your flavor. Do you like color? Do you like black and white? You can't go wrong with the M10R or M10 monochrome, whether you're shooting the most modern lenses or the classics. People have usually asked us, I wouldn't be surprised if anyone even mentions in the chat or is wondering, are these the same sensor? To say they're the same isn't telling the whole story, because the M10R has the color filter array and the M10 monochrome doesn't. So the M10 monochrome generally has the edge and sharpness as just you would anytime you remove the color filter array, and the higher ISO performance. But they both perform really admirably. And as you said, John, we're basically seeing results from these classic lenses, which, by the way, we're going to go over lots of images coming up in the second half of the program, so stay tuned. But we are able to just magnify what these classic lenses can do. So it's really exciting to see what these new sensors can do. In addition to the dynamic range, in addition to the high ISO performance, you really don't make any sacrifices going to this new level of resolution. So with the stage set for the sensors and cameras we're putting these classic lenses on, John, let's go through and make our way towards that new Noctilux, because we started with the Sumeron in this classics range, so this continues to grow.
Right. So the lenses we're going to talk about. So we're going to talk about the Sumeron M, the 28 millimeter, the Thambar, the 90 millimeter f2.2, and of course the new kid on the block, the Noctilux 50-1.2, just announced today. So as we take a look at the 28 Sumeron, again, this lens was originally brought to market in 1955. It was a thread mount lens, and still made the lens we're making today. It's the same optical formula. It's 6 elements in 4 groups. The coatings are, as far as I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, are the current coatings, but the actual design, the glass, the elements, the construction is as close to the original as it was in 1955, made through 1963. It's a great lens. It's a lens that's a lot of fun to photograph with. It's great in any light, particularly, as we'll see in the later second half of our program, that really shines at golden hour, pun intended. Shooting into the light, it's a lens you can just literally shoot from the hip, just have a lot of fun because of how small it is. So Antonio, we've got an image that you've taken, and what I like about it, before you talk through it, is just how timeless it is. We really don't know when this image was taken. It could have been taken almost any time, and that's part of the magic of shooting classic lenses.
Yeah, exactly. That's part of the fun and part of the charm of these vintage lenses and these reissues. As you said, I think that'll be a theme going through all of them, right? The timelessness of each image that they create. So this is one, and we'll when we go into Lightroom a little later, if we have the time, we'll dive into this image a little further too. But it's just a backyard shot of my nieces, and you would never know, all kinds of when it was taken. You wouldn't know that this was during a socially distant, backyard summer. A gathering of only a few people. You wouldn't know that this was COVID times. And there's an element to the timelessness of any image created from these lenses. And I was just showing on the camera, the matte black version that I have here on the table. I just kind of love it personally. That's why I can't help but put my hands on it and show it off, because there's something beautiful about the classic design of it, but with the matte black, like more modern look to it, is really, really cool. But going from the Sumeron, that was the first to kick off this, these new reissues. But then we have the thumb bar, which, John, I think there's kind of like a love it or hate it camp on this one. And just tell us in the chat, by the way, if you're in the love it or hate it for this one, maybe for the soft focus thumb bar.
Yeah, it would be great to know everyone's reaction to the thumb bar. And you're right, Antonio. To me, it's a lens that has multiple personalities. It's a lens that you simply just can't pick up and shoot and create great images. You really need to study the lens. You need a lot of seat time with the lens to really get images with it. So it's a very dreamy, romantic look. It's has a 20 blade aperture, stepless, also stepless aperture, along with a center spot filter. So looking at images here, if we look at the center image, it's very easy, let's say, to create in studio a very 30s glam portrait. And it's very beautiful. But then take that same lens outside with a model, and it has a completely different personality. And start to look at the out of focus bits, the emotional parts of the image and how they're rendered. And it's just really very, very different and really beautiful. And to me, what I like about it is the softness. And I do like the out of focus bits, particularly the shot that you did, Antonio, in New York, of the Freedom Tower with the center filter, where we get these amazing highlight bokeh rings. It's, to me, the thumb bar is a lens that allows you another octave in your visual voice, if you would. It's another paintbrush to create images with. And I think exactly. It's a lot of fun. Yeah.
Yeah, and you use the perfect word for a paintbrush, because it really, with that center spot wide open, it really has that painterly effect. And I'm just going to give a shout out to some people in the chat, some commenting how they got to try out the thumb bar on like an M10 Monochrome and loved it. A couple of people saying how it's just not for them. That's totally fine. You know, there's some people saying how you can do this kind of stuff in post. I will say that it is different to use a classic lens that has this kind of rendering and get it like that at the camera level. And I'll give one final call out to someone who referred to it as the Hollywood lens. It really has that super classic soft focus glamour look. Now, this brings us to the new one, the Noctilux, the new kid on the block, as you said, John, but all the way back from 1966.
Right. So the Noctilux f1.2, again, 6 elements and 4 groups, was first manufactured in 1966, 16 blade aperture. So really beautiful out of focus highlights that are circular and simply amazing. The fall off is very 3-dimensional. And I think what we'll see in these images, particularly shooting it on an M10R, it's really approaching medium format look and feel. You know, the M10R, the color by itself is very similar to what the S3 produces. And with this particular lens, you really begin to get that feel, that fall off that you would with medium format. And I know Antonio and I had a great time checking out the lens, the few moments that we had to shoot it, and hopefully, and we'll dive into some of those images. But in true Leica form, we also have special packaging. And Antonio, tell us what you like about the packaging.
Yeah, it's all right. I know, like, we can tease me about this all you want, but I can't help but geek out and nerd out about some things like this, because, you know, the new Noctilux reissue comes with a very faithful reproduction of the original packaging. And I'll just call out, we had some initial questions Someone asked from Amitava asking, does the Noctilux have the same design, same coatings, etc., as the original? This is pretty much the same design as the original, and it will render basically virtually the same image that the original will from 1966. So I think that it calls to attention then, the reasoning for going to that original formula for even the packaging and the lens case that it comes with, and even the lens hood that it comes with, for that really classic vented hood style with the clip-on hood. You can have your fun with it, photographing like you're an old-time press photographer. But not only have we, continued the lineage of this lens through every little bit of the optics and the rendering and the reproducing of it and the packaging, all those little finer points, but also releasing with this lens is a silver version, which is a special edition. And there's some really cool, fun reasoning behind this. See, when the original Noctilux came out, it was in that transitional period where most lenses prior were, almost all of them were silver, except for some special cases where they made black ones for photojournalists. Then when the Noctilux came out, it was one of the first ones to be produced as like the serial production was a black lens. Only a few were made as prototypes in silver. It's around 5 lenses were made. They are now the most sought after and some of the most valuable Leica lenses on the collector's market these days. So as a spiritual successor to the original Noctilux, as this reissue, there's now this special edition, which is limited to only 100 units worldwide in the silver finish with matching silver hood and cap. And you can see they went all out with making the packaging match almost 100% pretty much with the original box of the old Noctilux 51.2. So really cool, really fun. Like I said, can't help but geek out a little bit about the stuff because I just think the story and the history and lineage is fun. And one more thing, I think I see some people talking, and one thing I want to make sure to comment on, this new reissue, like all of our reissue classic lenses, has a 6-bit code on it, right? So when you put it on an M10R, M10 Monochrome, the camera knows what lens it is instantly. So it's another thing that, having a nice advantage of the update to the reissue. So, John, with all this talk of, classic lenses and high resolution sensors, where do we stand though, for a quick moment, with classic versus modern, right? We see, you and I commented as soon as we saw this lens, this is so compact, and this is a 51.2, and you look at newer lenses and they can be much larger. So I don't know, John, any insights on why that is, and why classic lenses are typically tinier, and why lenses have gotten generally larger as time has gone on?
Well, I think first off, it speaks to our core values, right? The essentials. So when these classic lenses were designed, we were shooting film. And as we all know, film does not resolve to where our sensors are today at 40 megapixel. And I think as time marched on, we were looking at a couple things. We wanted, in this case with the Noctilux, even kind of raising the bar, going to f1 in 1976, and then 0.95 that we have today. So all that means we're going to gather more light, we're going to need more glass. And I think the other component is design. As designs got more sophisticated, we're looking to resolve kind of still the same 3-dimensional look, but we wanted to render more detail. It was kind of like our taste kind of grew and evolved over the course of time. So when we want to further refine and correct lenses, we need to add elements. So all these things in a modern lens, we kind of have gone bigger. But of course, the lens, the father of all modern optics for Leica, the 50 apo-summicron, is just a few millimeters shorter than the 50 f1.2. And while they're worlds apart, right, in terms of rendering, they
Yes.
both have a place in helping photographers find and further refine their visual signature.
Yeah. And there's just, you know, there's a saying that they joke around in the car world, right? Reliable, fast, cheap, pick two, right? That's all you're going to get. And I think in some ways with, you know, with lenses, this is obviously a very oversimplification, but it's, you know, sharp, compact, and cheap, and you can pick two. And if you really go all in on two of them, the other one's going to have to make a little compromise. So, you know, it's just a matter of finding the right balance for any lens, right, with the size and performance that it's going to render. And as you said, John, you know, these older lenses were meant for rendering on film, but as we're going to see a bit coming up, how well they render on these new 40 megapixel sensors is really impressive. Now, John, you also mentioned how we took this lens out and put it through its paces a little bit. So yes. We've actually, so we've got a little video we want to show you a little bit of time. We went to a little field trip in Brooklyn, so some on the street time with the new Noctilux. We're here in Brooklyn with some classic lenses on the Leica M, and there's none more classic than the original Noctilux, 50mm f1.2. So we took this new reissue and we thought, hey, let's bring it to one of the most Instagram spots in the entire world, a place that, frankly, most people shoot with their phones, and we usually see it on our phones, on Insta, and now let's use some classic glass, bring the old to the new, and see what some classic rendering can give us. Okay, all right, this is insane. Just looking at it, some back-to-back shots, some of the earliest shots we've taken now with this new Nocti. This lens is, my first thoughts are, this is like two lenses in one. At 1.2, you have that beautiful kind of dreamy look, strong vignette, and I'm seeing the top and bottom above the Manhattan Bridge here, and it's got that classic rendering like all day and night. And then stop down, get around like 2.8, and you've got like peak maximum sharpness like you would expect from any modern day lens. It's really impressive. You know, Leica lenses are known for their wide open performance, but classic rendering at wide open for a classic lens like this is also very appealing. And to be able to stop down just a little bit and get that amazing look, modern sharpness, yeah, this is amazing. So now we've got the 28mm f5.6 Sumeron on here, and this is the matte black finish, really, really nice. Looks great with an M10R, M10 Monochrome, but people will say, why go for a 28 f5.6? Why not just get an Elmarit, right? f2.8, it's still pretty compact. It's not this compact. There's a certain way of shooting with this that's quite special, and I swear, this lens in this light is just absolute magic. You've got to see it and you got to try it to really understand it. Classic rendering, classic lens, classic usage. Just go ahead and shoot from the hip wherever. It's so light, it's so small, perfect for this light. So, a little bit of fun on the street experience with the Noctilux and the M10R. And I want to call out, again, a couple more great questions that we've gotten. Someone asked, how many turns on the focus throw is from minimum to infinity? Does it have a throw like the current Nocti? So I'd say it's like two short turns from lock to lock. If you do one long throw, maybe you can do it in one. So a little bit of the handling there. Saw a lot of people commenting on just how small and compact this lens is. And yes, it is quite impressive. When you see it in person, it'll be really, really cool. So John, you know, we showed a few pictures in the video, but video itself is, of course, another big part of any lens these days and the capabilities, because we've got cameras like the SL2 and SL2S that do fantastic video with M lenses adapted. So yeah, we've got some more test footage. Shall we roll it, John, for the Noctilux on the SL2S?
Yeah, let's take a look at that that footage with the SL2S and the 50 Nox. So here, a little bit beyond golden hour, maybe nautical sunset, and just doing the rack focus. And to me, it just blew me away looking at this footage, just how cinematic, how painterly the rendering is. It's just really nice. And I can see a lot of cinematographers, videographers gravitating to this lens, for that reason. It's just beautiful, right?
Yeah. And now this shot, though, this is my favorite, and not just because I shot it, but I got this one of you in the frame. Again, just some test footage that we were rolling just for the fun of it, and we'll let it loop a couple times because it's fairly short. But what this lens renders, and with all those little points of light, I mean, just look at that. Look at that blur, and you can see John nicely sharp in the foreground. I love that bit of the screen lighting up his face, and then he steps out, and then just it's really amazing to see what these classic lenses can do in video and not just stills, because seeing it through the lens in a moving picture can sometimes be even more inspiring, I think, sometimes than the still image. So it was really fun to shoot these couple of quick test clips. I see that some people are already commenting. We've got a couple OMGs and a gorgeous in the chat. Keep the comments coming, folks, because this is it's always fun to get some interaction from everyone. So, John, really, with the video capabilities of the SL2S, and obviously a Noctilux 0.95 is great, but the vintage Noctilux 1.2, it's quite a nice combination, eh?
It's really nice, and like as we've described it, right? Very cinematic, very painterly in the rendering, and it's a lot of fun. Again, another lens that can be used to explore your visual signature and really give your photographs and your video a different look, a different style. And to me, it's always great not to have to do it in post. And in fact, sometimes it's just a lot of work to make it look like a vintage lens looks.
Yeah, it's true. You have to go through a lot of work to do that. Whereas when you do, this actual from the camera level with the lens, it's a whole nother ball game. Now, we've talked about visual signature, so we've got some images to jump into. I did see one question I do want to call out. Someone asked, in terms of the 6-bit code and the recognition of the Noctilux, the 1.2 in the camera firmware, because you don't see it in the list. But I can tell you there was a firmware update today for M10R, M10 Monochrome, and M10P cameras, which also added another feature called Leica Perspective Control. We don't have time today to go into the nitty-gritty of it, but I'll advise you to check out the website us.leica-camera.com and check out more info on that. So check out the firmware update for all you M10R, M10 Monochrome, and M10P owners. But in the meantime, we've got some images that we want to show you now. So allow us to take you to my Lightroom catalog so we can go into some of these images and really dive in a little further about what you can get with these classic lenses on the M10R and M10 Monochrome, these 40 megapixel sensors. So just a quick note, ask your questions, let us know what you think. We want to keep answering them as we go. John, let's start with this image. You showed it in the slides earlier. This is that image I took with the Sumeron. So we'll start in order with the Sumeron images. And here, we talk about sharpness and quality and detail and rendering. As you said, it's kind of timeless. One thing I love about sharing my Lightroom is to show you maybe also like where I've processed, how I've processed, and you can see here, I didn't really do that much to this actually. I think I did some changes and then I undid them all because I really liked how this was rendering just straight out of camera. And if we zoom in, right, this is wide open at f5.6. Honestly, I almost always shoot this lens wide open at f5.6 because it's just good. It just gets that rendering that I like and I'm used to. And it's almost always easy to shoot from the hip. So yeah, it's really nice to see the quality coming out. And again, this is 100% zoom. It's a great render, great look on the M10R. And again, the color. I didn't do anything to this file because not just out of pure laziness, it's really because I don't think it needs anything. It's that nice, pleasing kind of vintage look from a vintage lens. Some of these images we'll show you have a very film-like quality to them, even with a digital sensor.
No, I agree with you, Antonio. It's, part of it's the fall off. It's the way the highlights are manifested, as well as the mids. And it's just very pretty. And again, it's allowing you to communicate a message. This was I get looking at the image, it's like it's a lazy, summer afternoon, to kids just having a good time and not really, aware that you're taking photographs. And it's just, again, it's just like that little snapshot in time. Again, timeless. You don't really know when it was taken.
Yeah,
It could have been taken
exactly, 100%.
this
And what I'll
summer
add to
or
that,
40 years ago.
and John, what I'll add to that is this is also, to me, one of those quintessential M images. And I only know that kind of because I'm behind the camera and I took it. The way that I shot this, I let the scene unfold in front of me. I took one shot. I saw them coming through the frame, beyond the frame line, because that's one of the benefits of a rangefinder, of course. And I waited and waited, and once they made it to just the right spot, I took the picture, right? So to me, these kinds of images are important in how you take them. And again, with a lens like the 28 5.6, it's kind of just focusing is effortless. Now, we already saw this image at first in the video at the end of our little Brooklyn journey from underneath the Manhattan Bridge. And again, you can see all I did mostly was some straightening and a little bit of contrast adjustment. But for the most part, this is practically out of camera. The light was just really nice. And I always like to zoom in a little bit. I know sometimes people get a little excessive with pixel peeping, but come on, with Leica lenses, you can't go wrong. It's fun to dive in and see what you can get. I mean, here we're looking at, this is a 200% magnification on an M10R 40 megapixel sensor with a lens that's, sorry, John, how many decades old is the Summron? It's old. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, it's old, right? more than 60, so more than 6 decades. Yeah, and to me, the thing again that I always love about the vintage lens is the fall off. It's the rendering. It's how it renders skies, and we've got here with the flare. That's one thing I always love to do with any lens, is to see how it reacts to flare. And the 28 Summron is spectacular. It just does, I don't know, it does what it does. And to me, that look and that feel is nice. It's not what I want every day, but it does tell a story. And again, at the end of the day, if I'm in Brooklyn and this is what I'm feeling, and with that lens, this is what I'm shooting, and that represents more than just the detail of what's in the frame. It's speaking to the emotion of the moment, and really giving the viewer as well as myself the memory of that time, but as well as the feeling of it.
Yeah, exactly. And this another one where I just shot this from the hip. These guys were just kind of unassuming. While it wasn't even that far from them. You got that little bit of the vignette in the top right corner. It's really quite nice. I saw some people mentioning in the chat that the images can look a little dark. It can vary. We're going through streaming, of course. And I'm always happy. We can always connect at a later time to, if everyone really wants to try out some of these raw files, I'm happy to share them as well. You can always reach out to me at SuperAntonio64 and John at Leica Pro Image. So again, another one with the Summron. I do want to add to this one a little bit more of how, because taking the picture and seeing the picture is part of the story. How you took the picture is something that, as photographers, of course, maybe because we're a little egotistic, but how I shot this is important to me, because funny enough, I shot this one-handed. I couldn't do this with another lens, really. I remember I had my phone in my right hand. I saw this coming together, and I was tinkering with like a gimbal for my phone for some video, and it was too clumsy, so I wanted to get this shot. So with the Summron on an M10R, I actually held it like this. I then just brought it kind of loosely focused with my one hand and shot it like this while holding my phone in my right hand, which was just ridiculous. But it yielded this image that I really enjoy of this little moment with these two, looking at Jane's carousel near the Brooklyn Bridge with this, just fantastic flare coming on the side of the frame.
And that is a true story. And it is sad that the carousel was closed due to COVID.
It is, yeah. But let's see. So I think people probably want to see more from the Noctilux, the 51.2 that we've been talking about and is new today. So yeah, that's a bit of the Sumeron. Now let's talk Noctilux. And I'm gonna just give a quick disclaimer, folks. If you look at the EXIF data in the top right, I apologize that it's off, and that's my fault. I did not have the camera settings correct because it was pre-firmware, and this is a pre-production lens. So my apologies. But ultimately, that is not a 35mm lens at f4. This is a 50mm Noctilux at 1.2. And if we zoom in here, you can see the quality and the kind of sharpness you can get, as well as the the blur. Now, of course, it's a little less dramatic when we are focusing on something farther away. But I just love it. I mean, again, going back to the video we filmed, here in Dumbo, this is like the quintessential Instagram photo, right? And here we took a lens from 1966, the reissue, of course, and took this same image. Here was at a camera. I underexposed a little bit. I'm happy to underexpose a bit on both the M10R and M10 Monochrome. They have such a great dynamic range. There's no harm in pushing the shadows. And honestly, I could do a lot more here as well. I'm just a little bit more of a, sometimes a little hands-off, editor and post-processor. But if you really want to go crazy, I mean, hey, you could always just put it on auto, and usually Lightroom will just do its thing, whether for better and for worse. But just really cool to see what this can do, with such an iconic photo. And it's even better, of course, when you put someone in front of it and photograph them, like this one I got of you, John, when you were filming me on Washington Street.
Yeah, it's again, the rendering is cinematic, painterly, whatever adjective you want to use about the fall off, but the sharpness in a plane of focus to me is incredibly impressive. And Kevin asked a great question in the chat as how the rendering compares of from the 1.2 to the f1. And to be honest, I believe the 1.2, to me, that fall off is really both are very nice. Both are very painterly, but I think the fall off on the 1.2 is stronger. I think the f1 is a little more corrected, where that linear line between plane of focus and background is not as dramatic as the f1. But unfortunately, we didn't have an opportunity to shoot a bunch of different lenses side by side, but that would be an interesting comparison.
Yeah, for sure.
I love the scooter shot, with how the background goes in. Again, it just speaks to how that fall off, the three-dimensional look of it, how the lens responds to highlights, how it responds to shadows.
And I have to add here, I hope maybe people can notice or maybe don't notice, there is a person in this background that is just so blown out of focus. They barely are a person anymore. You can see the legs here, torso here. But meanwhile, the sharpness you get even at 1.2, this is at close focus. This is about, I believe it was around the 1 meter minimum focus distance. And you can see this is still sharp. This isn't just like some soft focus kind of deal. Is it the same level of technical sharpness as a 50 Apo? Okay, maybe not, but it's got that rendering and that look. And look at this look.
Right.
Again, John, you're using you as my subject. But
hey,
again,
I didn't give you a model release, Antonio. I didn't give you a model release. You're using a lot of these images.
And neither did this gentleman, unfortunately. But this is that same kind of thing. I saw him coming from behind you, and I waited at just the right moment. I snapped this shot, and you just look at this rendering. And again, this is straight out of camera. You can see in my Lightroom history over here, no changes made to it. This is just imported. And then you could see the sharpness and detail at 100%, even at 200%. Like texture on the skin, still very visible. And then comparing to, just how beautifully blurred this background is. Perfect circles in the bokeh, because again, the 16 bladed aperture ring is just so nice. So lots of love.
But I like the way because it's an M, you were able to, that guy as he was walking, that you wanted as a point of interest. And not that it's the subject, but it's used as a reference. Just shooting with the M allows you to place that person right where you want them and capture the image. And that's, again, the strength of an M camera.
100%. And then now we saw these images quickly, on the video. Here's the another angle on the Manhattan Bridge with at 1.2 versus a 2.8. So, I joked in the video, it's like two lenses in one, and you kind of see that firsthand here. So if we let's see, get a little comparison going. And if we zoom in to 100%, you see how at 1.2, it is quite nice and quite lovely. At 2.8, you can see how that gives you pretty much the amount of, modern day sharpness thing you would expect from just about any lens, especially any Leica lens. It's phenomenal. So, that's what we mean when we kind of, casually say it's like two lenses in one. And that's the way, you shoot a classic lens. And again, not just 100%, even 200%, right? The amount of added sharpness you get when you stop this lens down just a little bit. But you still have that awesome, rendering.
Right. It's cool to see how the vignette changes also.
Yeah, exactly.
Between wide open, and it's very cool.
And then one more image that we did show in the video. Again, just that timing when it comes down to shooting with an M. And I love this image. Again, all I did was crop it a little bit, fix the angle slightly. You can see that this is just straight out of camera in terms of color and look. It has that film-like quality we've been talking about. And this, once again, is at 1.2 at the minimum focus of 1 meter. And talk about corner sharpness, right? Especially with classic lenses, everyone assumes the corners are gonna be soft and muddy. Not the case with the Nocti 1.2. That is quite impressive for such an extreme at minimum focus distance and towards the corner of the frame. And then, of course, to at the same time render this beautiful background blur is just quite phenomenal.
Yeah, I was blown away by that. Not really expecting it, and this is a lens that hopefully at some point I can maybe borrow Antonio's or not, but and really dive deep into it and do more photography with it. It's a fascinating lens for sure.
Yeah. And for those, I know I'm spoiled. I've got to use this lens a little bit. For those that I know haven't been able to yet, but we do have some awesome proof performance images on our website as well. And here's one example that I think both John and I really like. The photographer, I'm probably not going to pronounce the name correctly. I apologize. Is I believe Milan Zvolfs, and did these beautiful kind of classic fashion shoot kind of photos. And yeah, you get a really nice look. Talk about timeless, John.
Right. It's like Vogue 1972, Mercedes Pagano, a beautiful young lady in some fashion garb and focusing just on the rear view mirror. To me, just, looking at the rendering, it's again, timeless. It has a look that a modern lens can't deliver and is difficult to replicate in software. So again, I really like this image. It was actually my favorite of Milan's images. So I'm glad we have the chance to show it. And again, they're all, or will be all on the website at us.leica-camera.com if you want to download them and check them out for yourself.
Yeah, and I just want to take a quick moment to mention the some of the comments in the chat. People, actually, we had one that I do want to call out. Someone asked about some other classic lenses, like the 50 Sumerit, for example. So we're happy to answer more questions about the Noctilux and just generally the classic lenses. By the way, did anyone? Maybe we didn't call it today, but what is your favorite classic lens? Mention in the chat. Do you have one? Can you pick one that you own or just have used once, or that you covet? What is your choice? Is it the new Noctilux, the original Noctilux, the original from '66, or a different one entirely? We're curious. Sound off in the chat when you can. I already see a 28 Sumeron, and also a fan favorite, as we've seen in mine too, as well as the 90 f4 collapsible. That's a bit of a deep cut there. Wow. I like that. Yeah. But someone mentioned Sumerit, and I wanted to take a quick moment, John, to talk a little bit about the imaging performance of the M10R and M10 Monochrome with these classic lenses beyond the ones we've already spoken about. So I've got a few images I want to share here. This one, another one that we shot while we were in Brooklyn. And this is my own personal 35 millimeter / 3.5 centimeter Elmar lens. This is a screw mount lens from 1948. So this is exactly what I'm talking about when we say, rest assured, your older lenses will perform A-OK on the new 40 megapixel sensors in the M10R and M10 Monochrome. This is a lens from 1948 on the M10 Monochrome. And I want to show you this sharpness. And again, I'm showing you in the develop module because I want you to see how I didn't add any sharpening. There's no tricks here, right? This is just pure lights optics shot wide open at f3.5.
That's your golden sample, right?
Really?
That was handcrafted by Max Barrick or
I think I have the perfect example of this lens. And it's just, it blows me away all the time.
It is incredible.
So yeah. It really is. And I see people sounding off, by the way. We got people mentioning, love the 75 Cron, the 35 Sumeron, yeah, another of the Sumeron family, Summilux version 1, people calling out I think I saw 35 millimeter Summicron version 4, which is a favorite of mine as well. That was my first Leica lens that I've owned. So yeah, keep it coming in the chat. I love it. So I want to also just mention one more thing about this 35 millimeter Elmar. I mentioned having these wow moments with the M10R and also M10 Monochrome. And for the M10R, again, it's in the color. And this is actually one of the first images I shot with the M10R and my classic Elmar of my base amp. And I just couldn't believe, again, the color coming out straight from the camera. You can see here, all I did was adjust the crop and I had some dust on the sensor, so I spotted it out. But here we see 100%, here we see 200% magnified from 40 megapixels. And this is wide open at f3.5. It's unreal what these lenses can do. And it just—
well, I see two things, Antonio. There's dust on your amp and you like to boost the mids. So good for you. But
yes, I'm a Lemmy fan. What can I say? May he rest in power. You know, I'm all about the mids. So, but again, you know, these kinds of classic renderings, I've seen some people say, like, you know, there's things like with Fambar, maybe some people feel like a soft focus thing is something to just do in post, but there's something to these kinds of lenses and getting this rendering straight out of camera that you just, to get it in post would just be such a challenge. And again, all the quality that we see, you know, some of these things in a way are like imperfections, the flare, you know, any corner distortion or blur in the out of focus area. It's still, it has a pleasing effect and look to it. Now, somebody did mention the 50 Sumerit, which I also have here. This is my 50 millimeter / 5 centimeter lights Sumerit f1.5. The original Sumerit was an f1.5. Nowadays, it's an f2.5 or f2.4. And here we have the Sumerit on the M10 Monochrome. And I just want to show, you know, again, this is, I underexposed a little bit. Okay, we've got a pretty harsh flare, but this is actually wide open. Wide open, this lens can be a little finicky and a little tricky to work with. But I'm just going to do auto, let Lightroom boost that up. And to me, this is a really cool look. I would personally maybe just even boost contrast a good amount. Maybe throw in a little bit of dehaze if I need to. You can see how that fence blur is kind of starting to be brought into it. Yeah, I just think it's a really cool look, even though it can flare quite a bit. I also got these images of this couple that was doing this wedding portrait shoot there on near the Brooklyn Bridge. Again, this is straight out of camera. I purposefully underexpose a little bit. I can always throw it in auto and see what it does. That's a little too much for my taste, but you know, I think there's the way that the light in this golden hour sun in black and white is catching with this Sumerit lens is quite special. I really like this one as well, where we see that you've actually got some sharpness here, even at the corner, a little bit. It's a little soft, but you know, you see how these points of light, the glimmering from the sequins or shiny bits, I will say, of the dress, really come alive. And you know, yeah, call it coma, call it, you know, some kind of aberration, but it's got a charm to it, in my opinion. So
right. Well, it's, yeah. You know, it's the I mean, that's, I think, the strongest thing. I mean, I've said it a few times, is that emotional rendering. It's, you're no longer just documenting that moment. You're bringing to it with a vintage lens some of that emotion that was there.
Mhm.
You know, some of the whimsy that you see, and it's, it may not be your daily driver, but sometimes shooting a vintage lens is a nice reprieve, right? It's a break, it's a change that's going to allow you to see things differently, communicate things differently, but also, just help you along your photographic journey. So vintage lenses are a lot of fun to shoot.
Yeah,
Definitely.
exactly. And again, we want you guys to kind of, if you're in the market for an M10R, M10 monochrome, you already own one, and if anyone's feeling apprehensive about these reissue lenses or your original lenses, we encourage you to use them. I want to show you this image because this is an example where I heavily underexposed with the Summit wide open at 1.5, and I'm like, this is going to be a nightmare with this flare. But just in where these new sensors can help us, here's after a whole bunch of processing, the kind of look and rendering that I can pull from these old lights screw mount lenses. And my example, my Summit is from 1952, so it predates the M system entirely. And to me, this has a nice quality. Oh, whoops! I magnified right to 200%. So you get so much resolution out of these new M cameras that it really starts to throw off your perspective. You can zoom in like 300% and be like, wait, is this a little soft? Oh no, I'm 300% magnified. It really can just blow me away. So again, you get a really cool, as you said, emotional rendering, vintage look, and paired with the M10 monochrome, to me, it's just like Tri-X is spilling straight out of the camera. Put the M10R and a vintage lens, it's like Kodachrome is just oozing forward. It's really fun. As you can tell, we kind of get into these things. So one last thing, I want to show one more Summit image. Just love the glow to this. Really, really cool. Another Brooklyn shot. And again, John, you mentioned timeless. If I told you I shot this on slide film in 1985, would you believe me?
I don't think you're that old. But no,
if I
mean,
said it was
to your
1991.
No, but to your point, it looks timeless in the fact that you don't know when that image was taken, and it does have a very film-like, in this case. To me, I would agree. I look at Kodachrome, and that's again just another dimension to a vintage lens, is the rendering, the color, and how they respond to modern sensors. And it's, again, just adding more to your photography and allowing you to be more creative.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to call out a couple more comments in the chat. Someone said, please do a redo of the 35mm AA spherical. That would be amazing. That would be amazing. I also don't know if it's just physically possible. That lens was very difficult to manufacture. Someone also asked, how would you compare the new 50 1.2 reissue with a 50 1.4 Summilux A spherical? John, I want to get your 2 cents. I would just say, it really just comes down to what you're looking for. The 50 Summilux to me is a perfect Goldilocks 50mm lens. It's got the speed, it's got the sharpness, it's got the best balance of kind of everything. What do you think, John?
No, I agree. It's a great it's a great lens. It has what I would call a modern rendering, right? So it's not quite as dreamy on the fall off. So again, all these things, it's great when we have opportunities to shoot these lenses and really dive deep and kind of see what they do, and then looking at the images, really try to connect and say, is this a lens that really refines my vision, or communicates my vision, or tells a story that I want to tell with my photography? And I think many people that are into vintage lenses and have shot vintage lenses, that's the reason why they do it. There's a certain look that these lenses give that add either the emotional component or maybe a feeling of how they render light that tells, you know, another component, another part of the story, and it all, you know, comes together in these images, and then that's part of the message that the photographer wants to communicate to their audience. So I think vintage lenses are a lot of fun to explore and to dig deep, and to me it's part of the creative process. I don't, you know, I mean, I'd love to have a collection of lenses, but you know, getting to try, pick and choose, looking at other images and talking with other photographers and seeing images and asking them what lens this was, to me is a great way also to explore vintage lenses.
Yeah, exactly. And also, you know, the part of for me is it's just fun is what it comes down to. And photography should be an enjoyable experience. If you're getting paid and it's paying the bills, sometimes it's just going to be work, and that's okay. But when you pursue it as your passion, even if it's your passion on the side from your photographic work that pays the bills, you want to enjoy it. And there's, to me, something enjoyable about the heritage and the legacy in the M system, the compatibility with the screw mount lenses, you know, with the lineage there, just with a simple little ring adapter, and you can use it. You can adapt it to our SL2, SL2S and film video through it. So you have all these options. Someone did also ask in the comments, Koos Hamburger asked, you know, how are we adapting these screw mount lenses? So I just have a little ring adapter here that screws onto the lens, giving it a bayonet mount. You can find, if you're a little lucky, you can find the old Leica ones. They can be a little hard to come by. They're made by different manufacturers. I would say just check reviews and make sure you have a good quality adapter that's also not going to do any damage to the camera or damage to the lens. So make sure you check reviews there. And you know, I think, let's see if we got any more questions. You know, there's something to be said. I think Bill Brown was talking about the timeless information. It's timeless images, right? And in documentation, whether it's street or portrait, you know, these lenses are amazing. I agree, Bill. Great comment. Great thing to add. And you know, I think in the end, it's really just about telling your story, whether that's with modern lenses or classic. But knowing that these classic lenses can do all this and can, you know, take advantage of the latest generation cameras and technology, I think is also a whole lot of fun. So, John, any final thoughts before we wrap up on this this topic for this episode? Any key takeaways for people to try out or go seek out there?
I mean, I would say, you know, as we mentioned during the course of this hour, that for me has just flown by. But it's really, you know, it's great to try them and try classic lenses. Many of these lenses are readily, when I say readily available, online. Many retailers,
secondhand market, yeah.
Secondhand market, they're available. Many of them aren't a lot of money. You know, you just want to make sure that, you know, you don't get one that's hazy or has fungus, of course, but right. You know, and that's certainly one way to explore it. But also, like I had mentioned, looking at other photographers' work who use vintage lenses, and you get a real sense of how these lenses render, and if it's something that you'd like to acquire and try and shoot. So,
yeah, well, it's well said, John. And I think many of us, you know, sound off in the chat, by the way, if your first Leica lens was some kind of historic or older secondhand lens. I mean, I think most of us, that's what brings us in, right?
Right,
you know, definitely. I don't have it with me here, but part of what got me into Leica cameras, just as a photographer and becoming a fan, was just that I got to use a screw mount Sumitar 50mm f2 collapsible on an M6, and it just blew me away because that lens was a pre-war version. You could tell by the different aperture markings on the barrel, and you know, that just I couldn't believe it. So that's what kind of started to hook me and convince me. And yeah, we've got a few people mentioning that, yeah, there's is the first is a used or vintage lens to start with. I got a couple more questions before we fully wrap up. Chats, I see you asked, silver chrome made of brass. Oh, sorry. Let's see. People ask, is a silver new Noctilux made of brass, and therefore is it heavier? Yes. So the special edition silver Noctilux 51.2 is made of brass, and therefore a little heftier than the black version. And I had another great question. I'm sorry if I mispronounced the name. Ovier Aaron Zabal asked, what 35 is best for the monochrome? I'm just going to say pretty much any Leica or Lights 35 millimeter. You just take your pick. John, can you go wrong with a 35 Summicron, Summarit, Summilux, anything?
No, they're all great. They're all going to render beautifully. I mean, I do like the 35 Summilux aspheric. And I think that lens is magic on anything. But to be honest, even something like a 3.5 centimeter Elmar is going to be magic on that camera. That monochrome sensor is just so good. 2 less reflected light surfaces, super sharp, no matter what the lens. So you just can't go wrong with any of them.
It's really true.
Sorry, you just have to buy one of each. It'll be great for you.
Well, there you go. And make sure it's from the whole catalog, all the way back to the screw mount lens. Yeah, this is great. I think people have, and I see people in the chat. Thank you. I appreciate the questions. I think there's a lot of excitement for this new lens. I know, it's really cool to see something like this coming back from the back catalog. And one thing, John, that we didn't touch on, but is I think important with this lens, with the thumb bar, some of these lenses, as we said, there were only 1,757 of these original black Noctilux 51.2s ever made. So now with the reissue, it can go into more homes. It can go into more people's camera bags and get used and put through its paces by a wider group of people that will continue to appreciate it for years to come. So I think that's also really cool. Is like, some of these lenses are so exclusive and so hard to come by, and now to kind of bring it out for a little bit of a wider audience. So if it seems like the right fit for you, you can pursue that for sure.
Yeah, and I think to that point, a lot of the 51.2s that are out, let's say in the marketplace, are really in collections, right?
Right.
It's not a lens that you see people shooting around. F1s are far more prevalent, but yeah, no, I'm excited to see what this does for people's photography. It's very exciting to bring these classics to new life.
Yeah. So last shout out to the chat. I see Paul Marotta mentioned the first Leica was an M6 and 35 millimeter Summicron Bokeh King, or King of Bokeh as they call it, the version 4, and was sold big time on that combination. And I'm with you, Paul. That's my first camera, my M6, I still have. I never want to give up. And my 35 Cron version 4, which sadly I did sell. And one day, I still know the serial number, so maybe one day it'll come back to me. Maybe I'll find it one day again, and it'll make its long journey back. Who knows? But John, I think we've talked a lot about vintage lenses. There's so many more. We could go all day and go through catalogs upon catalogs. We've just kind of focused on a snippet of these reissues. Ultimately, I think what it comes down to, folks, is use the glass that you respond to most, whether that's a 50 Apo and a 75 Noctilux, or a 50 Noctilux reissue, or an old Summarit, which has some haze in it, but whatever. It's all about what you enjoy and brings you joy to your photography. Wouldn't you say, John?
Definitely. And it's the only thing I'd add to that, of course, is it helps you develop your visual signature, your visual style, and these lenses kind of set you on that path. The lenses that you pick and the lenses that you shoot. So again, it's a lot of fun to explore, and I think it advances your photography. So again, I think it's very enjoyable. to do that and to explore these things.
Yeah, so I think that's about it for us today on Leica Tech Talk, and what we titled Classics Never Die and They Never Shall. May they continue to move on and march on and keep creating great images for us, even with this new reissue of the Noctilux. If you want to reach out, stay in touch, you can find me on social media at SuperAntonio64, John at Leica Pro Imaging. But thank you so much to our lovely chat. Leica Pro Image, I'm sorry. So at
okay.
SuperAntonio64 at Leica Pro Image. Thank you to our lovely chat. Thank you for these great questions. And John, thank you so much for being here with me to go out and shoot and go out and take some pictures, and can't wait for the next time.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Antonio, and thanks to the audience. It was great. Really enjoyed the chat. Great questions, and we appreciate so much your participation in Leica Tech Talks. So I hope everyone stay safe and has a great week.
Yeah. Until next time, folks. Signing off, Leica Tech Talk. Take care.
Take care.